Welcome to class. My name is Trevor, and I post D&D videos every week, generally on Wednesdays. In this video, I'm going to start what is going to be informally referred to as Feywild month. At the end of this month, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, the adventure set in the Feywild, comes out. I believe it's September 21st. I wanted all of my videos this month to have something to do with the Feywild. This first video is going to be a Feywild primer. Now, I'm not going to go into a deep dive, and I want to start by openly admitting I am not an expert when it comes to the Feywild. This is going to be a good introduction, but I'm not going to dive deep into the lore. For a lot of that stuff, and I'll try to include resources in the description, but for a lot of that stuff, you have to go outside of 5th edition anyway, because what's in the DMG isn't very much. This primer is going to be broken up into 4 parts. What is the Feywild? How does one get to the Feywild? What are the effects of being in the Feywild for people not from the Feywild? And who naturally can be found in the Feywild? So let's get into part number 1. What is the Feywild? According to the 5e Dungeon Master's Guide, the Feywild is the plane of the Fey. It is where, long ago, elves originated. The Feywild exists as a parallel to the material plane, as well as its sister plane, the Shadowfell. This mirroring is fairly direct. So a castle on the material plane may be an ornate gemstone castle in the Feywild, or a waterfall on the material plane might be a waterfall composed of arcane magic, like actual embodied like magic itself on the Feywild. Overall, the Feywild is more overrun with magic and wild, natural, arcane energy than the material plane is. The Feywild is overrun with woods and woodland creatures. Generally, there's a sense of monarchy also associated with the Feywild. The Seelie and Unseelie courts are part of the Feywild. The specifics are not as clear, and they vary between editions of D&D, but the thing to keep in mind is that the Feywild is this place of chaotic and magical energy. And even like the courts, the Seelie and Unseelie courts, there's this focus on like being beautiful versus being ugly and being accepted versus being rejected. But there isn't a sense of good and evil associated with the Feywild. It is not that type of plane. But that's really what the Feywild is. That's what composes the Feywild. Now let's get to how do you get there? The short answer for this question is a Feywild crossing. And obviously that needs a little bit more explanation. Because the Feywild is parallel to the material plane, there are places where these things overlap. Fey crossings often look innocuous and natural. Maybe a circle of mushrooms, like a quote-unquote fairy ring, could let you into the Feywild. But sometimes it's a bit more complicated than that. Sometimes maybe it needs to be the winter solstice, or it needs to be under the light of a full moon. But there are these places in the material plane that can transfer you to the Feywild. And on occasion, you might even need a special object, like a key that would get you from one place to the other. So it's not as easy as just stumbling across it. Although that certainly could happen as well. And that kind of trickster, chaotic energy is undoubtedly very Fey. Now, what happens if someone from the material plane ends up in the Feywild? The effects of the Feywild are magical in nature, and they vary, again, from edition to edition. One of the things that is the most common is this sense of memory manipulation. When creatures that are not from the Feywild leave the Feywild, they don't always remember what happened while they were there. If they do, maybe they remember it more like it was a dream than something that actually occurred. Another of the most common effects that can happen from being on the Feywild is time passing differently. There's a table in the Dungeon Master's Guide that you can roll on for how time is dilated differently. Maybe one day in the Feywild equates to 1 hour on the material plane, or vice versa. But there is this sense of topsy-turviness associated with this type of interplanar travel specifically, unlike, say, going to the plane of water. When you're in the plane of water, obviously that is going to be your biggest hurdle to overcome. When you're in the Feywild, everything is so chaotic and everything is so magical that the journey itself is something to keep in mind and take into account. Quick tip, and I want to use this as an opportunity to talk about how you can enhance this kind of element of the Feywild. There are some tables in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything for random magical effects, and one of them is like a wild magic zone or something akin to that. And in my personal campaign right now, the material plane and the Fey are coming too close together. Like there's a force that's kind of crashing them into one another or locking them into one another. And what I do is every day or every couple of adventuring days, I have one of my players roll a D100 on this table, and a random magical effect happens to signify this planar abnormality that the world is going through. And that is a fun way to show this kind of chaos when the players are not even in the Feywild itself. It's homebrew, but my players are seeming to really enjoy it, so figured I would include it. And to wrap up this video, let's talk about who you'll find in the Feywild. The Feywild is overflowing with creatures that are innately magical. Hags are the first thing that I think of because I haven't hidden my general preference for running hags, especially as low-level bosses. They are old crones, think folk tales and Disney movies. They use tricky magic that works in a variety of ways, anise hags and sea hags. And there's a lot of information about hags in Volo's Guide to Monsters. I really, really love using hags in role-playing hags. Hag covens are an especially interesting way to amp up the chaos. And the thing to keep in mind, and the reason why I like bringing up hags first, is because that concept of a hag bargain and like offering something to get something in return, but it being this almost monkey's paw deal, that is very, very Fey, right? Like there is this superstition that you do not make deals with the Fey. You don't eat food in the Feywild because you are making a promise to someone. You are indebted to them, and that is risky and dangerous. And I think hags are a creature that is most commonly associated with, whereas that is pervasive across the Feywild and all of the denizens of the Feywild. Beyond hags, we also have the kind of fairy folk to lump them all together. We have fairies, we have pixies, we have quicklings. These are all, they range from like Tinkerbell style fairies to far less benevolent, like dangerous, more almost military, like tiny sprites that are attacking, and they create this, they're a nuisance. Some of them, again, are more militant, and some of them are more whimsical and magical and will cast polymorph and change you into a T-Rex or what have you. But these small fairy creatures are something to certainly watch out for if you end up adventuring through the Feywild. And last but certainly not least, we have the Eladrin. Eladrin are Feyborn elves, and because of existing in the Feywild for this entire time, rather than the elves that came to the material plane, Eladrin have advanced magical abilities. They also have a direct correlation with the seasons. So there are spring, summer, autumn, and winter Eladrin, and it changes their personality and their appearance and the spells that they have. And they're really cool. Like everything that I've looked into about Eladrin makes them really fun and really interesting. There are, I don't know if it's in Unearthed Arcana or one of the books, but there are rules for how to use Eladrin even as a playable race, an Eladrin that shows up on the material plane or what have you. But I think that Eladrin are a really interesting way to take even something that is Fey in origin and amp it up to 11, right? Show what happens to elves that never left the Feywild and have found their home there, and how the intense effect of the seasons and being on that plane has changed that like group of creatures. It's really cool. And I think that they're really interesting characters. There's a lot more about Eladrin in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, if you're interested in looking into that as well. Well, that about wraps up the first video of Feywild Month. My goal in this video was just to set the groundwork. Hopefully now you understand what the Feywild is, how you get there from the material plane, what happens when you are there, and what you might find while you're there. This is not the deepest of dives, and I'll put some more resources in the description down below. If you want some more content about the Feywild this month, before the release of Wild Beyond the Witchlight, please subscribe to this channel. I have a homebrew adventure in the works. I'm considering doing some more Magic the Gathering crossover that fits with a Feywild flavor, and I might even do some more player options. What kind of character could you play? What race and class and subclass would fit for a campaign that is taking place either in the Feywild or a game that might eventually end up in the Feywild, maybe to coincide with the release of the book. If you have suggestions for anything you want me to cover related to the Feywild or related to anything D&D, drop it in the comments down below. And as I always say, be safe, make smart life choices.